After our 1-day break of not talking about Indiana football, we kind of have to go back to it and continue to digest what is wrong with this team. Where did things go so awry? So brought in a special friend to help me talk about this on today's episode.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, guys? It is Thursday, October 7th. This is, as always, Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Hoosiers is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and at Locked On Hoosiers. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. As I said, we have a special guest with me today, former Crimson Corey colleague, former Crimson Corey. The podcast was good co-host Austin. But I had to put this down. I made a note of it. What was the reaction when Kyle Schwarber hit a bomb against your Yankees last night?
Well, luckily I was at work, so I wasn't watching. I was out covering a high school volleyball match, so I just got the update on my phone, and I just kind of made a face and kept it all inside. That's it's kind of the theme of the Aaron Boone era. Make a face, keep it all inside.
I did not warn you that I had to throw that little dig in there. We mentioned it on yesterday's episode, the absolute moonshot Kyle Schwarber had. That'll be the last time I mention it, but I had to get one in there.
Thank you.
As I said, we are talking IU football today. Specifically, I mean, the biggest thing to talk about with football right now is Michael Penix's injury and how that ties into how much the offense has struggled, whether bringing in Jack Tuttle kind of fixes that, and then just kind of the outlook for the season as we start to look forward and figure out how much of this is salvageable. As I mentioned, make sure you guys are subscribed to us wherever you listen to podcasts, especially on YouTube as well. We appreciate your support over there. We're on Twitter at LO_Hoosiers and on Instagram at Locked On Hoosiers. Obviously, the news on Monday, as we mentioned this week, not good, obviously not the worst case scenario with Michael Penix's injury, an AC separation in his left shoulder, puts him at a week-to-week timeline. I'll just start off there with just kind of what your initial reaction was to the injury, to the diagnosis, and just kind of what your thoughts were on that.
Man, I just, to see that guy go down again and go to the locker room again and hear that he's out again, it just, my heart went straight to my knees, man. It didn't even stop at my stomach. It really was just such a bummer because, he's been in the program long enough now, and he's, been such a great player when he's been on the field. And this is now the fourth time this has happened. And it's just like, at some point you have to feel for him as a human being. It's not even, my football team's quarterback is hurt. We might not do as well in this game now. It's, you just got to feel bad for him as a man, because that's just, it's so brutal. It's so tough for him. And that was really just kind of my first reaction. Just like, I can't believe this happened again. That poor dude. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, especially somebody who, is such a tremendous, has been such a tremendous part of this program, a really big, part of building this program over the last few years.
I'd said a couple times during the kind of preseason when I would appear on podcasts that Michael Penix was as much of a face of kind of this turnaround for the Hoosiers as anybody was. Obviously, Tom Allen off the field is that face, but on the field it had been Penix. And that sentiment you had is exactly what Jared and I said on Tuesday's episode when we kind of reacted to this, is that, like, more than anything, you just feel bad for him as a man, as a person. If anybody deserved a break on this team, and almost college football as a whole. It's Michael Penix for everything he's went through. As you said, this is the fourth time he's had kind of a major injury. This one isn't necessarily season ending yet. Tom Allen kind of left open the possibility that it could require surgery if the rehab doesn't work. But even still, it's the fourth major injury he's had in as many years. Just a brutal blow for him, just as a person, as you said. And that's what, when it happened, they had already mentioned during the game that he was struggling with a knee injury to his knee that wasn't even the surgically repaired one. He almost immediately injures his shoulder after that. And it's just like, give the kid a break. Like, come on, football gods. This kid's been through enough. Like, give him a break. Let him get through this. But I mean, it was noticeable all season long that he wasn't the Michael Penix we knew because of those injuries. I mean, to you, how much of the struggles of this offense fell at his feet?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'd put it on him as much as I'd put it on just everything. I mean, when a group is that catastrophic of a failure as this offense has been through the first, 5 weeks of the season, that's not just one person. There's not just one problem there. It's everything. I mean, looking around, I mean, the only person I would say who has been consistently not terrible, maybe even sort of impressive over the first 5 weeks of the season is Stephen Carr. I mean, he's the one person who I look at and I'm like, okay, you know what? It's fine. I have no gripes with you. I mean, the offensive line has been porous. The Ty Freifogel, tremendous receiver, was, the best in the Big Ten last year. He's had his struggles, just up and down the board. I mean, Nick Sheridan calling plays, interesting decisions at times, interesting scheme there that he's gone with. It's just, I mean, sure, you could say that, if Mike Penix was playing out of his mind like he was before he got hurt last year, maybe all of those problems go away, but it shouldn't necessarily be on Michael Penix having to come out and be some sort of, football god to come and save the rest of you. It should be a group effort. It should be a collective, which is what it felt like, when this offense was successful over the last 2 years. You had these different pieces that all meshed together and you found success through that. I mean, you can put some of the blame here on, the fact that maybe Michael Penix wasn't this or wasn't that. But at the end of the day, it's just been so bad for so much of this season. I have a hard time saying that it's this one person's fault.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've kind of looked back on last season and wondered if, like, what happened between last season and this season, because Nick Sheridan was there last season and we didn't have these same issues. The offensive line struggled last season, and to me, the only biggest difference was how good Penix was, and clearly, I think he covered up a lot of that team's faults. That when he isn't at 100% this season, which again through no fault of his own, those faults appear a lot more. There's a friend of ours who is a Michigan State fan who I was we were kind of talking to about what happened, and he mentioned that good quarterback play can cover up a lot of things, and that he saw it happen with Kirk Cousins and Connor Cook for a long time for Michigan State. And I think that was ultimately the case last season. So when he isn't 100% this season and all sorts of other things kind of cascade with that, it's hard to point your finger at one thing. Obviously, Penix is kind of the head of all that, and his decisions, or his mistakes, I should say, maybe were the loudest because just the nature of being a quarterback. But he was constantly under pressure. His receivers were constantly dropping passes. The play calling has constantly been questionable, as you said. So it's a matter of a lot of things going wrong, and Penix having the physical kind of limitations he had in trying to get back, the mental hurdles I'm sure he's had to clear to get back. It all just kind of added up into the mess that was Saturday. Now we have Jack Tuttle taking the reins, and I don't know how much it changes things. We're going to talk about that here in just a moment. Before that, though, the Hoosier offense didn't seem to work up a sweat on Saturday, but in case they do sometime in the future, we have a product for them. SweatBlock antiperspirant wipes are doctor created, doctor recommended, simple product. I've used it. For whatever it's worth, I recommend it as well. It's a simple solution to kind of an embarrassing problem. Simply at night, take your antiperspirant wipe, apply it, go to bed, wake up the next morning, no more armpit sweat for the next 7 days is their guarantee. They also have a dry shirt guarantee where if it doesn't keep your shirt dry, you'll get your money back. It's a product that's been featured and tested on the Rachel Ray Show. It's been a bestseller on Amazon for 10 years, has over 13,000 reviews. Currently the number one product on Amazon's antiperspirant category. There's really no reason you guys shouldn't give it a try, especially when we have a 20% off promo code for you. Head on over to sweatblock.com. Use promo code locked on to get 20% off. That is locked on at sweatblock.com for 20% off. As we mentioned, also available at Amazon and CVS. Thanks again for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen of the day, guys. We're going to talk about Jack Tuttle and kind of where the Hoosier offense goes from here. After we do that, I should say, make your second listen of the day Locked On Raptors. We were just sitting here discussing the NBA preseason. OG Anunoby tore it up in the preseason opener for the Raptors, 21 points on Monday. So head on over there, take a listen, see how OG is doing. One of my favorite Hoosiers, another guy who had terrible injury luck while in Bloomington, but go over there, give them a listen, see what OG season is going to be like. Also, shout out to Victor Bezerra tonight. For those that didn't see it, IU wins in double overtime against Omaha. We talked about the men's soccer struggles on Wednesday's podcast. Took him to double overtime, but with 21 seconds left in the game, he scores the golden goal winner and saves IU from another frustrating performance. So shout out to him as well. Let's talk Jack Tuttle, because even prior to Penix's injury, the calls for Jack Tuttle had grown louder and louder on Saturday. Similar to the first segment, just what are your thoughts on Jack Tuttle and just what does he bring to this offense now?
Well, as you mentioned, there had been calls for Jack Tuttle for weeks at this point, and the first thing that stuck out to me was, shockingly, putting in Jack Tuttle didn't fix everything. There wasn't an on switch in the form of Jack Tuttle for the Hoosier offense. People made it seem like it would be that way, but shockingly, when your offensive line play is blah and your receivers are underperforming and the play calling is here and there, shockingly, a new quarterback who's not as talented without as high of a ceiling as the first guy comes in, it's not just going to make everything better. He comes in on the first play, he gets body slammed by a Penn State defensive lineman. I didn't think that it would happen that quickly, but it kind of showed right off the bat that this isn't going to be an easy fix for the Hoosiers. Looking at Jack Tuttle, just in a vacuum, I think that he brings stuff to the table. As he's not Mike Penix. He's not going to go out there and drop bombs, and he's not going to go out there and rack up 400 yards with 5 touchdowns. And he's not the guy that you put at quarterback if you're looking to take risks, if you're looking to go out there and try to shock the world. That being said, though, he's a backup quarterback, which he has been for most of his career. And for being a backup quarterback, Jack Tuttle is a very good player. He might be the best backup quarterback in the Big Ten. I'd say he's at least among the best 3. He's that because he comes in and he manages the offense. He runs it. You don't have to worry about Jack Tuttle making mistakes. He comes in, he gets the job done. He doesn't go above and beyond. he's not, there's a reason why he's not the starter. But at the same time, I think that he definitely he'll keep the Hoosiers afloat, just like he did last year. We saw him come in last year, and in the games he played well. I would say that, he didn't go out there and win games for the Hoosiers, but he didn't need to, because he had a team around him that was capable of going out there and winning games.
Yeah, that you touch on a couple similar points. I simply wrote he's a terrific backup because, as you said, he's one of the better ones in the Big Ten. I certainly do not have enough knowledge of the Big Ten to know where he ranks in that, but he has to be one of the better ones. He had those performances last season we saw against Wisconsin where he only threw for 130 yards, but he threw 2 touchdowns. The one to Wap failure was a great touch pass in the back of the end zone. And then the Ole Miss game, he battles through a separated shoulder. It was gritty, even if it wasn't pretty. Nothing about that game was pretty. But still, as you said, I think when it comes to Jack Tuttle, he can raise the floor of this team, even if it might lower the ceiling of it as well. He's not the dynamic, superstar potential talent that Michael Penix is, but he's certainly a viable quarterback. He typically doesn't make mistakes, albeit he had one of the weirdest, ugliest interceptions against Penn State. I will, for now, chalk that up to not playing with the first team, though that throw was so odd that I don't know that you could even count that as a miscommunication. I'm not really sure what happened there, but how much does it change kind of this offense having Tuttle in over Penix, especially in the current state of it, where I think Tuttle is would be a really good kind of game manager type of quarterback. Can he do that with how this offense currently is?
Well, the interesting thing here is that if you look at the way that Nick Sheridan called plays when Michael Penix was in, and then you look at the first handful of plays he called with Jack Tuttle, I stood up. I was hanging out with our pal Alex Robbins. I stood up and I screamed, "Why weren't you calling these plays when Penix was in the game?" You look at the way that he called multiple just one read stick routes to Peyton Hendershot. Get you 5 yards, get you in rhythm. It keeps you ahead of the chains. And he completed, I believe it was 3 of them. It was 3 or 4, I believe. And it's just quick, easy, simple plays, gives you a big target. Peyton Hendershot is a dynamic player, and it just gets you yards. I think that the thing is that with Jack Tuttle in the game, Nick Sheridan isn't going to get greedy anymore. It's not going to be, he's not going to be dialing up these complicated, long developing plays where he's trying to get all of these yards. He's going to start calling these 5-yard stick routes to Peyton Hendershot. He's going to start calling, hopefully, little drag routes to Javon Swinton or whomever may be in the slot. He's going to be kind of changing a little bit of the philosophy, because you kind of have to when you shift from a Penix to a Tuttle. You can't really say, okay, we're going to go out there and we're going to play Bruce Arians, no risk it, no biscuit, but only after we pick up 2 yards on first down by running the ball every single first down. So it's interesting that, Jack Tuttle is not Mike Penix. He's not as talented as Mike Penix. He doesn't bring as much to the table as Mike Penix. The ceiling is not as high. But I do think, like you said, it raises the floor, where I believe that because of Tuttle's presence within that offense, things are going to get simple. And over the first 5 weeks of the season, the Hoosier offense needs more simple. And no, that is not running the ball on first down. Throw the darn ball. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here, but throw the darn ball.
Darn will work for, but that was the frustrating thing in multiple regards is those quick little routes to get Tuttle in rhythm having come in right away, because Sheridan himself had said after either the first or second game of the season, I think the first game of the season, he said they need to do a better job of getting Penix in rhythm. And it never felt like they did that. the closest he was to being in rhythm was that Western Kentucky game, and it required him to throw the ball like a career high number of times. So it it was frustrating, it was odd, but in some sense it was encouraging because I think if they play an offense like that with quicker reads, with quicker developing plays, you can't sit behind this offensive line and wait for these longer plays, longer routes, longer developing plays, whatever it is. You can't do that with this offensive line. So if you're able to do some quicker things, just to pick up 3, 4, 5 yards like that, get ahead of the chains, then I think you can solve a lot of problems of this offense. I also think that's probably where Jack Tuttle is at his best, is to do simpler things like that, manage the game. He, like we said, he doesn't make mistakes. And I think this offense could really flourish if they're able to do that, or if Nick Sheridan will call the plays like that. It remains to be seen whether he will, because he's talked about putting his quarterback in a better position and getting them in rhythm, and it didn't happen previously. So be interesting to see how they handle that coming up on next Saturday against Michigan State. Now, that game suddenly is a lot harder than it looked like coming into the season. I certainly didn't expect Michigan State to look this good. And really, the Hoosiers' schedule in general is harder heading into this kind of second half, so to speak, of the season. So we're going to talk whether the expectations need to be adjusted and kind of what success will look like now for this Hoosier team in just a moment. Before that, though, our friends over at Rock Auto are able to help you no matter if you have a Ford or a Fiat. Why go to a local auto parts chain store, stand in line during a pandemic, all for them to tell you they don't have to part and they're going to have to order it anyway? Go to rockauto.com, skip all that hassle, save some time, save some money while you're doing it. It's a family-owned and operated business serving do-it-yourselfers for 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. Go explore their easy-to-use website. Find a solution for all your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. It's amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. Also, our friends at BetOnline, the Big Ten game this week, obviously, is Penn State at Iowa. Austin, I'm going to read some numbers here for you. Iowa is a -1 favorite. The money line is Iowa -125, Penn State +105 with an over-under of 41. Keep those in mind for just a minute. BetOnline is the #1 spot for pro and college football action this season. It's an updated site. They have new odds, new props, new contests. They're your #1 source for college football, everything football, really. Head to the website today, sign up, use promo code Locked On, and get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. They are giving you free money. So whether it's football, playoff baseball, basketball starting up, boxing, MMA, whatever it is, don't wait to take advantage of everything BetOnline has to offer. BetOnline's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Austin, does one of those bets stick out to you more than the rest?
I would have to say Iowa -1. I mean, they're at Kinnick Stadium, and as we've seen over the course of however many seasons now, when they're at home, they're just a completely different beast. I mean, we saw what they did to Indiana, which, now looking back at it a month later, looks not quite as bad as it felt at the time. We saw what they did to Maryland, and I think that this Hawkeyes group is really, really good. And I think that, looking at Penn State, I wasn't overly impressed when they played Indiana. I mean, they're a good football team, don't get me wrong, but, Indiana didn't look very good either. And it was, it wasn't it wasn't a head and shoulders blowout. It was, I mean, obviously 24-0, but, I'm going to have to go Hawkeyes. I mean, and you get -1. That's a pretty good line. I'm taking Hawkeyes all the way on that.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning Iowa on this. Their defense is really, really good, as IU found out firsthand in week 1. As you said, that loss doesn't look quite as bad as it felt, but it sure would be nice if IU stopped playing top 10 teams this season. Doesn't look like it's necessarily going to happen, though, because IU obviously is in probably their most brutal stretch of the season. Honestly, it's hard to pick one that's worse than the rest. These first 5 games have 3 against top 10 teams. Their next 4 games are against 3 top 11 teams currently. So Michigan State, number 11 on Saturday. Honestly, was surprised they were ranked that high. Then you have Ohio State, number 7 at home on the 23rd. That game is already sold out. You have a brief break with Maryland on the road, and then you travel to the Big House. Where does IU kind of go from here? Is the thing Jared and I have talked about is kind of where the ceiling of this team was. For a long time, I said it was 8-4. I don't know that I can make that argument anymore. So where does IU kind of go from here?
I mean, after that performance against Penn State, you kind of have to go up. I mean, I'm sure things can always get worse. This is Indiana football. There could be a comet that strikes Memorial Stadium tomorrow, and I wouldn't be surprised because God has turned his back on the Indiana Hoosiers. He did it many, many years ago. As Spencer Hall has tweeted famously, God hates Indiana football. But after that performance at Penn State, you have to go up. I mean, it was bad. So, you mentioned the ceiling. I think that the ceiling for this team, you can still get 2, 7, 8, 9 wins, maybe, if you add in bowl season. This team has just got so much talent, and they've got this talent has the track record over the last 2 years. They've had success in this program with these players. It's not like, you've got a bunch of, fresh faces in here. These are the guys that we've gotten to know over the last couple of years that have been 2 of the more successful in decades for Indiana. So I think that this team still has a chance to get to, 7, 8, 9 wins. They just have to, kind of pull their heads out of their rears and, start playing football again instead of doing whatever it was that they did at Penn State.
So the path to 6 wins is where I'll start, because that's still a pretty, relatively speaking, easy path. Also, I literally was looking up the tweet as you were saying that. As you mentioned, Spencer Hall with every day should be Saturday. I don't think it's overstating the case to say that God hates Indiana football and always will. Tweeted that in October of 2018. I can't tell you how many times I've retweeted that tweet just in that span alone. But the path to 6 wins still is relatively easy, because you would need to beat Maryland, who even in College Park, I would imagine IU is going to be favored. And then Rutgers is going to be at home. Minnesota is going to be at home. 2 games that I still expect IU to be favored, although I hate to say it, Rutgers looked at least decent against Michigan. And then a Purdue game that IU should be favored as well. The question is, can they win 4 of their last 5 games? And also the pressure that's going to come with that, because those are all going to be must-win games, most likely at that point. If you throw in an upset against Michigan State or Michigan, that not only alleviates some of the pressure, especially of those last 3 games, but it also makes this season look a lot better. Because as you said, this team has so much talent, which is why it's been so frustrating and deflating these first 5 weeks, this first month of the season. It's a lot of names that we're familiar with that are not performing at a level that we've seen before. Penix obviously was one of them. Ty Freifogel, you mentioned earlier, has struggled mightily. It's been really odd to see how unreliable he is or has been. And Peyton Hendershot has obviously stepped up, though. But guys like Miles Marshall have been virtually non-existent. Javon Swinton, who had moments last year, hasn't done a lot. Same with Jacoby Hewitt. So this offense is full of guys that we know we've seen perform well, but haven't been able to do that this season. So I think that's what's made this frustrating. And the belief is at some point those guys are positively regress to the mean, and you would imagine that there'll be some bounce back performances. But again, this is a brutal stretch of games that they're coming up against to hope for those bounce back performances. Is the bowl game still, I think it's obviously still possible. How likely is it, do you think, we'll wrap up here, that IU gets to a bowl game? I was looking when their last game was. It's right after Christmas, November 27th. Are we talking about IU in a bowl game?
I think at this point, I still, as this kind of first 5 weeks has been going along, there have been people who have been quick to jump to, the sky is falling, this isn't working, these are generally your Jack Tuttle truthers. I can't sit here and tell you, oh, I'm worried about, do you think we could please have a little bit of Little Caesars Bowl, sir? Can we have some more? No, this is still a team that should be looking at, a Music City Bowl berth. That should be, maybe if you get things going, maybe you're looking at a Citrus Bowl berth. This is a team that is talented enough to go out there and do these things. Maybe they won't actually get there, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm worried about whether or not Indiana's going to make it to a bowl game. Because like you said, you've got Maryland, Rutgers, Minnesota, and Purdue. Those are 4 games you should win. Maybe they are must wins, and Indiana in must win games over the course of history it's not great. But I mean, you look at these teams. I mean, Maryland has shown some things at times, but look at what happened against Iowa. They got whooped worse than the Hoosiers did, and they got whooped. It just, you look at Rutgers. I'm more concerned about whether Greg Schiano is going to accidentally give the whole team MRSA. You look at Minnesota. Tanner Morgan is existing. He's there. Tanner Morgan, see you later, Tanner. You're not that great. Purdue, is Jeff Brom even going to have a job there this time next year? That's a good question that a lot of people are asking. These are games that Indiana should, by and large, win. So at the time, I'm more worried about, is Indiana going to be playing in, Detroit, or is Indiana going to be playing in Nashville, or is Indiana going to be playing in Florida? I'm not so worried quite yet. I'm not ready to pull the fire alarm on this season for the Indiana Hoosiers. And maybe I'm an optimist, but I have some sort of belief that all of these players that we know are good aren't going to be bad for the rest of the season. I have some sort of belief that, Tom Allen is going to do something to get this figured out. I don't know what it's going to take, but maybe it's like hoisting Nick Sheridan up the flagpole by his underpants and telling him to start calling some quick passing plays. Sir, please, we don't want to have to give you a wedgie. Just call a one-read pass to a tight end more than 3 times in 5 weeks. I beg you.
It's wild looking back. I'm just looking at our schedule. Coming into the season, the game everybody had circled as the toughest game was Ohio State. Now, having some context a month into the season, that's IU's 4th toughest game. I would say the 3 teams they played are better than Ohio State. So I can't remember an IU season like this. The Big Ten East is always brutal. I thought IU was getting a bit of a favor playing Iowa and not Wisconsin this season. Boy, was I wrong. But this is a brutal schedule. The hope also, if IU just gets to 6 wins, this is a hope that is never going to come to fruition. The Big Ten certainly owes us after last season, and you would hope that they would put us in over some other teams in a bigger bowl game. Maybe it's a return to the Pinstripe Bowl and we can exercise some demons there. But the hope is that you get to 6 wins and the Big Ten throws us a bone. We'll see. I'm also an optimist. I ultimately think 6 wins is the floor of where this team would get. I'm not ruling out a win next week against Michigan State. I'm not that crazy about Michigan State, but I mean, they're number 11, so maybe it's just me, but we'll see. But 6 wins is still kind of my floor for where this team will be. Thanks again, guys, as always, for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. We'll be back on Friday to talk a little bit more, maybe about the defense, just to rave about them, because honestly, we focus so much on the offense that I just want to rain praise on the defense for how incredible they've been this season. Now, for your second listen today, head on over to the Locked On Big Ten podcast with Nate Dickinson. I don't know that we'll be on there this week, but we should be on there either on Friday or next week to just talk about IU and where they stand. As always, leave a rating and review wherever you guys are listening to podcasts. Austin, thank you a ton for coming on and talking about this miserable first 5 weeks of the season. You guys can follow him, as you can see on the screen on YouTube. There is his Twitter @ for you guys. As I said, we'll be back on Friday to talk about the defense and then head into a peaceful weekend for once this season. Follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. Subscribe to the podcast, rate and review, all that fun stuff. Have a great Thursday, everybody, and LEO.